most recent example of your inexperience in national security and foreign policy came from your recent careless statement about how you as president would be willing to send our troops to Mexico to fight the cartels.
For example, do you seriously think anybody on this stage is proposing invading Mexico?
That's not what I said.
I'm talking about
That's
building up.
Little fucking bitch. Do you seriously think? Look how mad.
Accumulated in Washington enough judgment that I would not have sat down with a murderous dictator like that.
Congresswoman Gabbard, let me. Oh shit! It's the same smear we've heard 500 times. Oh shit! Meeting with foreign leaders to establish peace. Oh shit! Diplomacy. Oh shit! Why do they think this is such a bang?
Like Roosevelt, who met with Stalin.
Like Donald Trump,
Reagan, who met...
Like Trump that met with Kim Jong-un? Yes! What is your point, sir? These people think they're having these gotchas at Tulsi, but all they're doing is showing themselves for the absolute chicken hawks they are. Like how they could think the one good thing Trump has done.
There were some fascinating clashes, particularly Tulsi Gabbard coming out on in conflict with Harris and Buttigieg in ways that she clearly did not benefit from. That trip with Assad is never going to be an asset.
He had a great line last night. Tulsi was saying that he wanted to send U.S. troops into Mexico to fight the cartels. And he looked at her and said,
do you seriously think anybody on this stage is proposing invading Mexico?
That's not what I said.
I'm talking about
really big moment for him stepping up on that debate stage as a front runner, you know, we should say, not necessarily in the national polls, but in the early states of Iowa and New Hampshire.
Which, by the way, is all that counts, because national polls don't get you elected.
100%. I'm just pointing out, you know, that there is somewhat of a distinction there. But again, you're right. I mean, Iowa and New Hampshire are the most important at this point in the election cycle, but also that was the first time that he had a big target on his back, and he deflected almost every single lob that was put against him.
Yeah, you remember that when Biden was the undisputed front runner in the first debate, they really went after him and hurt him, and then in the second debate, after Harris had done so well, she took a hit. So this is the first time we saw him as the front runner. Right, he did well.
Tulsi did to Pete what she did to Kamala, and Tulsi is very good at that. She's very effective when she gets going with her razor sharp specific narrative. Like this, you said this, you said this. She's very good at
she
this.
Quotes
and she did very well tonight, and
Yeah.
I think she was right on the point she made. Nobody wants to see our military at the Mexican border.
Nobody.
And this was the second problem. The first one was that he wouldn't answer the question on whether we should cut the Pentagon spend.
He never answers any question.
My God, this country spends more money on its military than what's the data? The next
10 countries combined.
What do you think is a better strategy?
Well, it certainly isn't nominating Tulsi Gabbard. I can say that. I mean, I think that most of her energy is put into criticizing Democrats, and really she's a Republican that just sort of has a D next to her name, I guess, because she's from Hawaii or something, and it's tough to get elected in Hawaii as a Republican. But she's not the answer because she doesn't really put forth the policies that appeal to people in the Democratic Party. Most of her time is spent bashing Democrats.
Number two, with Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard. Yep. First of all, always in the white suit, which you know is making a statement. You know she's been told always be in white because you're the good guy. She feels so overly produced to me.
No sincerity.
None.
And isn't it funny?
It feels very produced, and that's why I felt like she couldn't come back at Mayor Pete.
I think that's a great point because I think in 2019, coming into 2020, following Donald Trump, now more than ever, people are craving sincerity in their politicians. We do not want the cookie cutter, produced, filtered politicians. We want quite the opposite. So I think that has hurt her, and it will continue to hurt her.
Everything feels very produced.
So everyone else on the stage should really thank Tulsi Gabbard for doing their dirty work for them, because they should have really focused on Pete Buttigieg. So it was important to call him out, because this is someone who absolutely is a fraud who needs to be called out. So I give her credit for that. That being said, do I believe this was as effective as her attack on Kamala Harris? No, I think that this is definitely going to hurt him a little bit. I don't know that it will have the same impact that her criticism of Kamala Harris had. Now, I'll tell you why that's the case. So when she criticized Kamala Harris, she threw a bunch of stuff at Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris couldn't have possibly responded to everything, every point of criticism that Tulsi brought up in that short period of time. So Kamala Harris was kind of just left flailing.
Also, people were expecting a lot of people to go after Pete Buttigieg, and instead it was kind of interesting that a lot of people went after Tulsi Gabbard, which has this indication of maybe punching down. Kamala Harris had a good night, as Jessica was talking about, but she went after Tulsi, and it didn't go particularly well for her. And Pete Buttigieg also had a little round that didn't go so well with him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on Pete Buttigieg. I think he was getting into fights with the lesser animals of the forest, which is never helpful when you're sort of close to the getting to front runner status.
Well, I think for sure that Tulsi definitely came what she was looking for. Pete made it clear that, he came ammo ready. I'm a veteran, so I love seeing veterans have that exchange. I think it was solid. I think Mayor Pete certainly hit back Tulsi, and she had a good comeback for him as well. Very different than how Kamala responded last time when Tulsi came after her. So I think Pete had a strong answer, except with the exception with him not answering the question about black voters and turning it into an LGBT answer.
I'm glad Gabbard went after Mayor Pete said, and it just showed you what a weasel he is. Yeah. He stands there all ethical, and then when he's asked a point blank question, you said you're going to send troops to Mexico, and then he brings up Assad.
He brings up Assad, and then he's like, "Oh, you took it out of context. You really think I'm thinking of invading?" Blah blah blah.
You said that.
It's like, did you say it or didn't you?
Wow. Who got the better, Dan?
Well, I think Pete Buttigieg had a point there. I remember that moment, and Tulsi did get over her skis a little bit, accusing him of something that he really wasn't saying. I actually agree with Pete's assessment of our Mexico cooperation with Mexico and our military relationships there, as President Trump does as well.
And she got dogpiled. They were just trying to stop her. Pete's ascendant, they were mainly throwing marshmallows at him. Nobody came at him until the very end. Tulsi Gabbard went after him, got him a little bit flustered, a little bit off of his game. But you would have expected, I agree with David, you would have expected when you got somebody who came out of literally nowhere and is just tearing past everybody, that they would have turned and fired on the guy. I think he's hard to hit. I think he is such a good debater. I think people are a little bit afraid to engage him in that way. Klobuchar tried a little bit. She came up short. Tulsi got under his feathers a little bit. But I thought that Pete did very, very well.
Pete Buttigieg. And other people should have gone after him. They didn't. Kamala Harris completely let him off the hook. He just got caught manufacturing black support. He just got caught doing that. And then he doubled down on it when he got caught. And nobody took a shot at him for it. So the only person with enough balls to go after him, of course, is this Tulsi Gabbard, whose whole career now is taking the piss out of the establishment. And there's no bigger neoliberal establishment tool than Pete Buttigieg. And she went after him for casually saying that we would absolutely send troops. That's what he said. I'll show you the quote in a second. But he did say that. And by the way, so when she did that, that was good because she's showing the recklessness of guys like Pete Buttigieg, who are tools of the military-industrial complex, and he's willing to send troops anywhere, even Mexico, to fight drug wars. That was the point of that, and it was right on. He says, "Do you really think anybody is seriously considering invading Mexico?" Up on the stage, which gets a laugh from the crowd. Right, going to invade Mexico, right? Seems silly. That's not what she said. She said you would be willing to send American troops to Mexico to fight drug cartels. She didn't say you were going to invade. That's not what she said. So he switched it disingenuously, and she calls him out. She says,
Building up alliances. And if your question is about experience, let's all...
That's not. So that isn't what she saw. He totally gaslights everybody by saying that she said something else. She didn't say that. And then he goes back to the tired old smear. They can never attack or fight Tulsi on her policy. They always got to go for the smear. And here, that was a great response. And believe me, he is not liking this. When she said, "What you just revealed is that you lack the courage necessary to be the commander-in-chief, which requires meeting with our adversaries." She's right about it 1,000%. They did the same thing that when John McCain ran against Barack Obama. He said, "I would meet with anybody, anywhere, if it meant securing peace of the United States." And John McCain hammered him on that. You would meet with Ahmadinejad, the guy who said he wants to wipe Israel off. That's what they would do to Barack Obama. Barack Obama's like, I would meet with anybody. And so that's all they got. That's all they got. And I think people are seeing through it.
I think that Tulsi Gabbard was just awful, spectacularly bad. In fact, in a week between Prince Andrew, Jim Jordan, and Devin Nunes, she made a legitimate run for the medal podium, and just dishonest. At a pretty large level.
He is gifted, and I think his military service obviously helps him a great deal. He didn't, he flipped Tulsi Gabbard away when she came at him about wanting to invade Mexico.
I think Mayor Pete did have a great night. He showed he could pivot and punch, which you're going to have to be able to do with Donald Trump. You're going to have to, in a debate, you're going to have to pivot and punch. And he did that very quickly with Tulsi Gabbard. When she went after him with something that was just a bogus attack, he immediately said, hey, I'm not going to let you get away with that.
I've got Tulsi Gabbard and I got Tulsi Gabbard and I got Steve Schmidt up there that took a shot at you a while ago. I want to give him a shot. Steve, would you repeat what you said about Tulsi Gabbard?
This woman, I thought your performance was dishonest. I think your positions are extreme. And one question I would have for you is, why did you go to Syria to meet Bashar al-Assad? What was the intent of your visit there? And why were you so dishonest with regard to the mayor, insisting that he called for plans to invade Mexico, which, of course, he did not?
Tulsi.
Well, if you look at what the mayor said in response to the woman who asked him the question about Mexico, I was merely citing what the mayor responded to.
This was interesting because Mayor Pete did, in fact, say he would be open to sending our military into Mexico. She was not mischaracterizing his statement there, even though he tried to make it seem like she was.
No, that is exactly what he said. I think his campaign later clarified that this would be a last resort, but it's interesting what we discussed prior to getting to that. I mean, for one, we don't talk seriously about ending the drug war. I mean, drug cartels are fueled by prohibition, partly. Not entirely by prohibition, but at least partly. I mean, that is something that should be on the table. We should be talking about reforms like that before we're talking about, doubling down on counterinsurgency type strategies that all over the world tend to fail because they're dealing with things that essentially have political problems, that are essentially political solutions.
Right. And so what did you think generally said about Pete Buttigieg's hitting her on Assad? I mean, I thought, it's like, how many times do we have to have a redux of this same conversation over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, 4 years ago, I wrote one of the kind of banner critical articles about Tulsi Gabbard and her foreign policy for Alternate. I think since then she's adjusted herself quite a bit. I think she responded to a lot of that criticism fairly, moved away from some of the right-wing actors in India, for instance. I don't think that you should criticize someone just for being willing to sit down with a foreign leader. Nancy Pelosi has sit down with Assad. John Kerry has sit down with Assad. And by the way, we have thousands of U.S. troops in Syria. We should probably be talking to the person who runs the country. It doesn't mean that we love them or agree with them or even think they're a good person.
Every single solitary Democrat except for Tulsi Gabbard would be a bit, she's just a whole different situation. But basically anyone running for president in the Democratic primary right now would far surpass Donald Trump. There's no question.
Well, speaking of Pete Buttigieg, he has been rising in the polls, but did that make him a target tonight?
Well, I think that was the big debate among political pundits. Was he going to be the subject of attacks? The only attack he got was from someone who's going nowhere, and that's Tulsi Gabbard, who I think has been kind of an agent provocateur in the Democratic debates. She attacked Kamala Harris several months ago, and now she attacked Pete Buttigieg. I thought he did very well tonight. I thought, where he went after Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax and held his own. He certainly held his own against Tulsi Gabbard's attacks. He's certainly a very talented and smart candidate, as I thought Amy Klobuchar was tonight. I thought she had a very good night.
You could see that he's like, she's getting in the way. Stop getting in the way. But he doesn't have logical responses. So he tries to hang in there and fights back and goes to the standard smear, which they've been going at, Tulsi with from the beginning. Just like stale nonsense. What about Assad? Like so dumb. And then when Tulsi responds to that and destroys him, you see him at the end, he's got the look like a scared little boy. And then he says like, I get to respond to that, right? And then it like that kind of trails off. And then you hear Bernie like chime in like, so what I would say, and you know, he kind of changes the topic and goes off on something else. But you see that Mayor Pete at the end, he really didn't have anything to respond with. You want to know why? He's an empty suit, and he was just obliterated on live TV.